Lawmakers warn of citizens' revolt if government fails to address insecurity. Just as Senate says insecurity and state of the nation's economy are stretching the patience and resilience of Nigerians to the limit. Thanks for joining us on the program, everyone. You can join the conversation right now on X if you use the hashtag Beyond the Headlines. Remember to tag at TVC News NG and at Nifemi Oguntoye. Tonight, we confront one of Nigeria's most pressing issues, the alarming challenge of insecurity. Just yesterday, the National Assembly resumed with lawmakers sounding what can only be described as a 5-alarm warning. In the House of Representatives, we had Honorable Ahmed Jaha from Borno making a shocking revelation. It did say that the weapons used by the terrorists are more sophisticated than that of the Nigerian military. His colleague, Honorable Yusuf Gaji, issued a chilling warning. It was quoted to have said, if action isn't taken, Nigerians will take their destiny into their hands. The narrative isn't different in the Senate, where they resolved to hold a 2-day National Security Summit aimed at addressing the security challenges facing the country. With our defense budget skyrocketing from 2.9 trillion in 2023 to over 4 trillion this year, the big question is what is really happening and what must we do differently? Joining me on the show today are two critical voices. Honorable Babajimi Benson is chairman of the House Committee on Defense, who has oversight over Nigeria's largest ever security budget. Also joining me is Dr. Kabir Adamu, security expert and MD Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited, whose December 2024 report exposed the worsening crisis despite increased spending. Gentlemen, thank you for joining this conversation.
Thank you.
Good evening.
All right, we have just 25 minutes, so let's dive in. Honorable, your colleague from Borno made a startling claim yesterday that Boko Haram is more sophisticated, or rather sophisticatedly armed than the Nigerian military. He cited their use of weaponized drones. Do you agree with his assessment of the equipment gap?
Firstly, I'd like to commiserate with Mr. President, with the governor of Borno State, Babajimi Zulum, with the entire people of Borno for the losses they have in Borno during the recent attack. I will never accept to that the insurgents have more weapons than we do. Yes, over the years, the presidency have spent so much money on equipping the armed forces of Nigeria, and I've seen increasing acquisition of weapons. I know that a lot of weapons are still coming in. The tactics or the strategic focus now is how to dominate the sky, and as you well know, it's not easy nowadays to procure. Those equipments are not bought off the shelf, but increasingly there's a there's an increasing focus to buy more sophisticated weapons, and in the next couple of weeks the Air Force will be launching some weapons which they intend to deploy to these theaters. So I do not believe that they have more sophisticated weaponry than the armed forces do, but you know, in a situation of war that we're in, they use unconventional tactics to hit targets and they run away. You know, so unfortunately that happened recently in Maiduguri, but the armed forces are up and doing, and in the fullness of time, in the not too distant future, you will see proper and coordinated approach towards dominating the skies. I remember in Turkey, the PKK used to threaten and bomb different parts of Turkey. But the Turkish government dominated the sky using drones and other air missiles and weapons. And that's what we're seeing. This year's budget alone, the Army Aviation had a huge portion going to purchase of aircrafts and coal. The Navy as well, and the Air Force in 2 weeks. will also come up. And this is part of Mr. President's efforts to ensuring that Nigeria becomes safe. I do not believe that, in answering your question specifically, they do not have more sophisticated weaponry than we do.
I'll follow up on that shortly, but let me hear from Dr. Kabir. What's your assessment of the current situation and where we are? Another member of the House of Reps, Honorable Gaji, yesterday warned that Nigerians will take their destiny in their hands if insecurity persists. Do you think he's exaggerating?
Exaggerating. It's a reflection of the sentiments of the country. Several persons have spoken, some of them notable leaders who have held the highest leadership positions, even in security. They have demanded for the weaponization, as it were, of communities. I'm totally against that. I also think it's reckless for a parliamentarian to speak in that manner. We have enough weapons in the hands of non-state actors at the moment. We don't need more weapons in the hands of non-state actors. I think what we need is to strengthen public security. And as a parliamentarian, he knows he has the power of oversight over the security agencies. And so instead of pushing the bulk, as it were, to the communities, to the citizens, let him strengthen that oversight function that he has available to him, so that we see an improvement, especially in accountability within our security sector. I can't say this more clearly than the way I'm saying it. I feel sad, Nife. I was looking at the statistics for fatalities since the president assumed office, and 17,000 people have been killed. Before him, the last 2 years of President Buhari, about 19,000 Nigerians have been killed. So if you add that together, we're looking at about 38,000 people in the space of about 10 years. And I mean, I agree totally with the Honorable in terms of budgeting, in terms of procurement of equipment. The government has been doing amazingly well. And I'm one of the few persons who keep on commending President Bola Tinubu Ahmed's renewed hope agenda. But we need to tie that together to make sure there is an improvement, a visible improvement in public security. And the only way to do that is to make sure all the arms of government are working towards enhancing security. Each of them has a role to play. And I would not sit here and pretend I do not understand that the National Assembly, as an example, has oversight functions. They have budgeting functions. They have legislation functions. And that if they improve on that, then the executive arm of government, would do better in terms of accountability. The Honorable commiserated with the Governor of Plateau State, commiserated with the President. But what we haven't seen, Nife, is one person being held accountable for this number of deaths that I've mentioned earlier on. So to move forward, I'm hoping to see this National Assembly enhancing its legislative capabilities, both in terms of legislating on laws, and then in terms of its oversight functions of this security department, so that we would see an improvement in accountability. If a particular security sector is given responsibility for any area and there is an attack, we should be able to hold that security department, ministry, or agency responsible. Why did you allow that attack to happen? And we're not doing that at the moment.
Honorable Benson, it seems that a lot still have to be done when it comes to helping Nigerians understand the position you expressed earlier. I think it was a retired Brigadier General who mentioned that terrorists now have encrypted communications and GSP, or rather GPS-guided explosives. I know that your committee is also investigating the Giwa Barracks incident. But what do you make of claims that procurement processes fail to deliver cutting-edge tech to frontline units?
Yes, like I always say, most equipment nowadays are bought on a government-to-government basis, which means the armed forces transfer money to a government agency in another country. So again, getting those equipments are difficult because you don't just buy arms off the shelf. You have huge demand from Ukraine, from Russia. So we're competing against giants who can pay cash readily. But besides that, we're punching above our weight. We have DICON. The president was gracious. He signed the DICON bill about about a year ago. So it has enhanced local production of software and hardware for these military challenges. We buy MRAPs, we try to buy MRAPs locally from Nigerian manufacturers. And 2 days ago, he signed the Nigerian first executive order, which means that procurements will be done locally. So in all these wars that we're facing, the armed forces are also building capacity locally and partnering with Nigerian companies to produce arms and ammunition and MRAPs and giant big ticket military equipment, which are also exported to Niger and all those other countries. Yeah. Where I feel there's a gap is, fighting this war has kinetic and non-kinetic approaches. The federal government under Mr. President has urged states to adopt state police. But for some reason, governors are foot dragging. That's one. Two, I recall the late Lagbaja, when the Supreme Court granted autonomy for local government, he was extremely happy. He said to me that they've been waiting for this day to happen because at times when they conquer territories, they do not have people to hand over the repented or the good boys to, right? But when the bill was, when the Supreme Court granted that, he was so happy that that law will be implemented immediately so that ungovernable spaces will have semblance of governance. You have hospitals, you have those kind of things. But till date, there are issues with local government setting up local government accounts. So the problems are Hydra-headed, not necessarily at the footsteps of the federal government. We need to all come together and have an all-society approach in ensuring that these matters are eradicated.
Talking about all-society approach, Dr. Adamu, that sounds like something you've also advocated for. A 2-day security summit is what Senate is proposing. I've heard some critics call it a distraction. You've organized such dialogues. What concrete outcomes can Nigerians demand now beyond talk?
Let's move. Let's do what we're supposed to do. Honestly, there have been enough conferences. Perhaps maybe it's just to harness even the recommendations of those conferences. And the recommendations are very clear. One of the recommendations, like I mentioned earlier on, is for an improvement in accountability. The other one is for synergy within the security sector. So maybe the National Assembly should even pass a legislation, as it were, a law on synergy, where it's proven that any security sector, ministry, department, or any agency decides not to cooperate or collaborate or coordinate its activities with the others, it can be held responsible. So maybe that's another one. These are recommendations. Then there is also the recommendation to establish a national multi-stakeholder security council. Just to mention to Honorable, I don't know if Honorable is aware, in the private security sector at the moment, the last time we took an audit, it employs up to 3 million Nigerians directly. And when you now expand it to the indirect employment, such as tailors for the uniforms, the purchase of boots, and several other things, it reaches up to 10 million. So why is it that we're allowing this huge number, not supporting, as it were, in our national security imperatives? Then you have the traditional rulers. You also have think tanks, such as the alumni of the Defense College, the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, the Security Institute that are here. Name them, several others. Ali Gusau has one. Several individuals, I think, exist. They have think tanks along that line. So how about if we establish a multi-stakeholder forum that would be advising government and that would help us achieve this all of government and all of society approach. Then the third one that I know has been recommended previously is let's move from this federal approach to security to bring in the governors. We have 3 instruments, Nife. I know we're short of time, but allow me to quickly mention those 3 instruments. The National Counterterrorism Strategy, the Policy Framework on Countering Violent Extremism, and then our law on terrorism prohibition and prevention. Now, most of our governors, frankly, do not know the contents of these 3 instruments. So how about if the National Assembly bring the governors together, sit with them in a room, and discuss these 3 instruments together with the federal MDAs that are responsible for security. So instead of a conference, perhaps I'm thinking this is a better way to utilize taxpayers' money and ensure that we see an improvement in the all of government and the all of society approach to national security.
All right, sounds like, Honorable, consider this like a teaser. We'll probably get into a bigger room to have these conversations. But there's the big elephant in the room. The defense budget has increased now to close to 5 trillion naira. You've had a lot of concerns about oversight over the spending of this fund. I think it was Group Captain Sadiq Shehu, retired, who likened unchecked security spending to giving a wife money without checking how the children are fed. Should Nigerians be worried about how the money is spent? What oversight measure is your committee implementing to track the effectiveness of security spending, and also to carry many Nigerians along who see this as an easy excuse anytime an attack is reported?
Okay. So if you divide that 5 trillion naira by the exchange rate today, you find out that the money pales into insignificance because you have to pay personnel, you have to feed them, the recurrent expenditure, the personnel cost is not easy because the amount of boots on the ground, you have to pay for their uniforms, you have to pay everything. And the amount left for capital as well, when you convert it to USD, is not enough to buy the equipment we require. Technically, it seems as if we're at war. We're at war with insurgents. We're at war with people who live amongst us. So it's not the type of conventional warfare that everybody understands as one country fighting the other. It's an internal type of war we're fighting. So also it's not easy to procure those equipment. There are wars everywhere. There's everybody's chasing the same thing, the same market. The steel industry is in comatose and stuff like that. So at times you may even have all the monies in the world stored as a budget that we all see. You can't buy equipment because you're waiting for your order to come up. You only have deposits, So to the best of my knowledge, I do not think there's any, the money sounds crazily big, 5 trillion naira, but if you do the conversion, it's the cost of, we can't buy much critical hardware out there.
All right. I remember the last time we spoke, I think it was earlier this year, we had that conversation where you think that we probably aren't spending enough. But the good thing is, this is perhaps the highest we've spent ever, yeah? That's why Nigerians are expecting more. But the good thing also is that I have a politician and a security expert. I want us to talk about the politics of things, because there is this perception that things get worse in the area of insecurity the closer we get to election year. I will begin with Dr. Kabir. Retired Brigadier General Adewumbi alleged that some politicians invite enemies to discredit opponents. What's your opinion about these political calculations and how they hinder counterterrorism efforts?
There is enough literature. There is also enough intelligence reports that show clearly political push and pull factors are responsible partly for the security challenges. Sometimes what the mistake we do in the country is we think just because one factor is mentioned, then it's the only factor. No, there are several other factors, but the political factors are also, like I said, push and pull factors. It's documented that there are non-state actors, some of them armed, that political actors do use to either protect themselves or in certain instances to intimidate their opponents. Then the one that kind of worries me is was well put by Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala in a recent lecture in Lagos, when she ascribed to the weaponization of security by political actors. So on the one hand, you have the ruling party that wants to show success in security, and then you have the opposition party that would want to show failure in security. In previous elections, security was a factor. It helped some candidates, and then of course did not help other candidates. Now, there are players who will actively support the deterioration of security, and I'm saying this with all sense of responsibility. In other words, there are players who would actively go out there to perpetrate certain acts so that they show that the ruling party is not doing well in the area of security. And some of them are actually supported by the opposition players, or sometimes even political persons within the ruling party who are not happy with one reason or the other. And I think it's very important that we get our electoral laws very right, and especially the role of the judiciary, because it will reduce that tendency where grievances are addressed through the judicial process, or of course even before that through the electoral process. It will reduce that tendency for the political class. Then the last component is the international players who are also actively and politically interested in having the elections go one way or the other. So just before the elections, you may see certain activities going on supported by these international players. We've seen it all over the world, and Nigeria is unfortunately not immune from that.
All right. Quick one, Honorable. The last time, I think it was last week or thereabout, I had the Benue State Governor on the show. And I remember asking him specifically if he feels that there is an act of sabotage as regards the security challenges he's faced with. And he answered in the affirmative. How much responsibility do you see your politician friends carry in this fight against insecurity? And how do you see lawmaking as a solution to that challenge?
Yeah, lawmaking is a solution. I'll take the last question first. Lawmaking is a part solution because, like I always say, kinetic and non-kinetic. Non-kinetic, we've legislated, we want to set up the armed forces, farms and ranches, right? In order, if there's food security, the welfare of the citizenry improves, and in some cases they get less agitated and they get less weaponized. Yeah, so we're trying to establish that law that will ensure that most ungoverned spaces, most places within the barracks or outside the barracks, we legislate that those kind of places be occupied by the armed forces and turn them into big, large farms that would make Nigerians self-sufficient in food production. That's one. Two, Nigeria always forgets that during the Shagari era, Nigeria attained its eminence in being the dominant force in West Africa and in Africa as a whole. That was what necessitated us going into Liberia and Sierra Leone and liberating those countries. Now, Nigeria is such a good and disciplined country that when we did all that, we expended all our goodwill, all our capital, equipment-wise, in those countries. We have not been able to regain that strength back, simply because when other countries go into other territories to do the same thing, they make economic benefit out of all those countries that they go and liberate. Nigeria didn't do that. Nigeria did it as a brother indeed. Now, foreign countries became suspicious that this country that did this with its own might, with its own power,
all right,
yes, what can they become in future? So I will always support that assertion that foreign countries do not want Nigeria to attain the eminence that its true qualities deserve. And the opposition party as well, they do not want to see you excelling. Are we there yet? Are we protecting our people as adequate as we should? The answer is no, but we're building blocks.
Honorable Benson,
the government has expended the biggest,
this conversation is inexhaustible, yes. And I'm sure you agree with me that we probably will invite you again and again to continue to have this conversation. But I've completely run out of time, and I love to keep both of you beyond the slotted time, but I'm not able. Honorable Babajimi Benson is Chairman, House Committee on Defense. Thank you so much for joining us on the program this evening. And Dr. Kabir Adamu, security expert, and MD Beacon Security and Intelligence Limited. Gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us on Beyond the Headlines.
Thank you so much, Nifemi.
That's our show today, everyone. Thanks for being a part of it. Remember, you can watch it again at midnight and at 6 a.m. tomorrow. I am Nifemi Oguntoye.